All right, so today we're talking about percent equations, and I really like this visual from Connexus. You know, we've been doing proportions where you cross multiply, but you can also write it as equations. The part equals the percent times the whole. So let's look at that. Identify the part, the whole, and the percent of the following statement. Well, the percent is pretty straightforward because it says find 10% of 75, so we know that 10 is the percent. We want to find 10% of 75. I'm sorry, I keep saying 75, of 750. That means 750 is the whole thing, and we want to know what 10% of that is. So to find the part, we would have to do the percent times the whole. 10%, remember, of means multiply, so of 750. Now, when we type this in a calculator, we don't type the percent in, we change it to a decimal. So we're going to do 0.10 times 750 to solve for the part. And so that means that the part is 75. Write a percent equation that can be used to solve the following problem. 700 is 20% of what number? Now I'm going to go ahead and tell you that I usually like to write it exactly in the order that it comes. So if it was me writing this, I would write 700 first. And then I would do is means equals 20%, of means multiply, and what number is a letter. So if I was reading this, I would write it exactly how it looks. 700 is 20% of what number? And now you can't type that 20% into the calculator, so I would convert that to a decimal, so 0.20 times x. This was my gut reaction for how I would write this, but I want to point out that it could be written in a different order, right? You can change the order that you write equations. So you could flip this around and you could say 0.20x equals 700. And if you didn't like to read it out exactly in the order that it goes, you could try to identify the part, the percent, and the whole, and you could plug it in this order. But the part is 700, the percent is 20%, and the whole we don't know. But for me, it's easier just to write it as I read it. All right, let's look at number 3. Write a percent equation that can be used to solve the following problem. Again, I'm going to write it exactly how I read it. 25 is means equals what percent? So I don't know the percent. So I'm going to, you could put like an X or a P for percent, or you could even put like X percent because you're trying to figure out what percent. I think I'm going to go ahead and put a P for percent. Is what percent of 200? I mean, of means multiply. So for this one, this is how I originally write my equation. 25 equals the percent times 200. Of course you could rewrite this as 200p, or you could switch the order and you could put 200p equals 25. There's a couple different ways that you could write the equation. But it's got to look something like this. It's got to have the part equals the percent times the whole. All right. On a 40-question test, Peggy answered 30 questions correctly. What percent of questions does she answer correctly? All right. So since this one isn't written out in words where it's just super easy to write the equation, this is where I'm really going to focus on the formula. So the part equals the percent times the whole. It's a 40-question test. That represents the whole test. She answers 30 questions correctly. That's the part that she answers correctly. And we want to know the percent, so we don't know that yet. So I'm going to plug it into my formula. Part is 30 equals percent, we don't know it, times whole, which is 40. And they use a dot. You can use a dot or you can use parentheses. And we're trying to solve for what percent she answered correct. So we're going to go ahead and divide each side by 40. And then 30 divided by 40. This is going to give me a decimal. 0.75 is my decimal. Now remember, we're trying to figure out what percent. So we don't want to leave our answer as 0.75 because that's a decimal. We want to make sure that we convert that to a percent by moving our decimal 2 times to the right. So she answered 75% of the questions correctly. Out of 75 students, 25 are on the student council. What percent of students are not on the student council? Ooh, this one's tricky. So if 20, okay, we'll first start off. 75 is the whole, because that's all the students. 25 are on the student council. We're dealing with a part here, but this is not the part that we care about. 25 are on the student council, and we want to know how many are not. So before we even write our equation, we need to take our total and subtract off the 25 that are on the student council to figure out how many are not on the student council. So this is actually the number that we're going to use for part. We're not going to use 25 because that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the numbers that are not. So what percent of students are not on the student council? Let's fill in our information now. The part is 50. We don't know the percent, but we do know the whole is 75. We want to solve for percent, so we're going to divide each side by 75. And that will give us our decimal answer, and then we will be able to convert it to a percent. So 50 divided by 75 is 0.666 repeating. If we move that decimal 2 times, it would be 66.6%. So I'm going to go ahead and write down that I get my decimal, and then once I get my decimal, I have to convert that to a percent by moving it 2 times. And that's it. Good luck on this quick check.